Good morning. Good morning.
I try. The seven rules. Very simple. You go to any of these places. Oh no, they don't want to.
Okay. Today we're going to start Daf Mem test. That's page 49. Right on the top. We thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. And in this learning, we should have this Mikdash immediately. It starts like this. Rabbi Akiva, and according to Rabbi Akiva. So let's go back and go over what happened there. We were discussing a Nazir becoming contaminated to a Meis Mitzvah, which is a corpse that has no one to bury it.
He was accompanied by someone who was at the day before. I had like another
So then, yeah, that was also a discussion. Who would become tummy first? If it would be a Nazir and the Kohen Gadol, or which one was, that was a machlekes. But we had a verse, the verse says, all the days that he is a Nazir, to the soul of the corpse, he shall not come. To his father, to his mother, to his brother, to his sister, he should not become tummy in their death, because the crown of God is on his head. Well, each one of these words teaches us something. So we had the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel. Shmuel says that the word la'achiv, to his brother, that's what teaches us that he becomes tummy to a meis mitzvah. That's a totally extra word. The father and the mother, the father was necessary to the mother. We learned to teach us what Rebbe says. Remember the halach of Rebbe? That a Nazir is allowed to become contaminated to other impurities that aren't from a corpse. For example, tzaras or zivas. And from the sister, we learned that even someone that's headed to do an important mitzvah of Karban Pesach or a bris milah, but he comes along a corpse on the road, he should postpone the mitzvah or possibly push it off entirely.
So the tumor from a corpse is the highest form of tumor?
In order for the meis mitzvah. Okay, so that's what Rabbi Shmuel said. Rabbi Akiva said that, very interesting, said from the father and the mother, Aviv and Imai, that teaches me that a Nazir becomes tummy to a meis mitzvah. Something that is obligated to do, even though a Nazir is not supposed to become tummy. But if it's a meis mitzvah, then he's supposed to. It's only his close relatives that he doesn't become tummy to, his father and his mother. The meis mitzvah, yes. So he actually uses two words to teach me meis mitzvah. Then Rabbi Akiva goes on and he says, what do I learn from the brother? According to Rabbi Akiva, we learned from the brother that a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir that are walking, I'm sorry, not a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir. A Nazir that is a Kohen Gadol that is a Nazir comes across the meis mitzvah, so he becomes contaminated to him. What do I learn from La'achesai? Exactly what Rabbi Shmuel learned, the same thing, that a person would postpone the milah and Karban Pesach in order to bury the corpse. Okay, according to Rabbi Akiva, this is what we're holding now on the top. Michti. Michti means now that, or let's see. Leishna Kohen Gadol chudei, Leishna Kohen Gadol vu Nazir, nafka milecha. A Kohen Gadol that's a Nazir, I can derive that from the verse that says that he doesn't become contaminated to his brother.
No matter what.
To his brother, he doesn't become contaminated, but to a meis mitzvah, he does. That was an extra word of the brother. Now, since the Nazir doesn't go to the brother's funeral, so but I already knew that because we said that he doesn't go to his relative's funeral. So what does it say? Add in that word. It's coming to teach me that to the brother he doesn't go, but he does go to the meis mitzvah. Yeah, it doesn't matter who it is.
Yeah, I think we learned earlier that some, like, I think there was one opinion where a non-relative would be, it was like would be different than going to your parents or like a relative.
Right. But we said that a mace mitzvah is someone that doesn't have anyone to bury.
Uh-huh.
That would be. I mean, it's possible for a relative to also be a mace mitzvah, but
You mentioned that someone that wasn't a close relative, he wouldn't be as.
yeah, okay, okay. So the Gemara asks, if a Kohen Gadol that's a Nazir doesn't become contaminated to his relatives, but he does become contaminated to a mace mitzvah, so a Nazir himself for sure should. There's a Kohen Gadol that's a Nazir. So what do I need? The verse that says the mother and the father, which teaches me that a Nazir becomes contaminated to a mace mitzvah. I know even more than that. I know a Kohen Gadol that's a Nazir. A Nazir that's a Kohen Gadol becomes contaminated to a mace mitzvah. So lavuli melamali. Why do I need that verse? The Gemara says tzrichi, it's necessary. Because of aviv, because if it would just say the father, that to the father he doesn't become contaminated. So hava, I mean, I would have thought, you know why he shouldn't become contaminated to the father? How do you know it's really the father? It's an assumption that it's the father. But for the mother, where it's not just an assumption that it's the mother, they give birth at home. They didn't give birth in the hospital. Like the babies got mixed up. There was no assumption there. The baby was born in the house, never left the house. So the only question was if it was the this one's baby or the maid's baby. That was the.
But a mother, you know for sure.
Mother, no, you know for sure. The father is just you have to make an assumption. So maybe, but the pasuk that tells me that he doesn't become contaminated to the father would mean to the father you don't become contaminated, but to the mother you do. Why not? What's the logic in that? The father you don't become contaminated because maybe it's not really the father, but you're not going to. You don't want him to be contaminated to someone that's not a real relative. But the real relative, the mother, that we would accept. That's what we would have thought.
Well, the quote says for his father or his mother.
But that's why it says for his mother. Because if it would say that he doesn't come contaminated to his father, I would have thought that it's to the father that doesn't become contaminated because of that specific reason, that we don't really know that it's the father. It's just an assumption that it's the father. No, that's good. The ikasi rachmana imai, and if it would say just the mother, no, it's good. If it would just say the mother, that he doesn't become contaminated to the mother, then I would have said exactly the opposite. For the mother, he doesn't become contaminated, but to the father, he does. Hava mina imai leila tamila, the lav ozil zara basra. The mother is not the real family. Remember, we said that the father's family is considered the family. The mother's family. They could have thought that he doesn't become contaminated to the mother. Okay, that's the mother's not the real family, but to the father, then he does become contaminated. If it would have only said one of those terms, mother.
Like the father wasn't like guaranteed, but then that's the real
right,
family.
Right. That's the interesting thing. The and that's why we need father and mother to tell me that he doesn't become contaminated to either of them. In other words, just one of them would have told me that he becomes contaminated to the other one. So that's why both are necessary. Okay, now when I have both of them, I say to both of them he doesn't become tamei, but he does become tamei to a mace mitzvah. Maybe that's not even necessary. Maybe I know that from La'achiv that he can become contaminated.
Was there any sort of incentive to really help deal with the mace mitzvah for a Kohen or a Nazir, other than it's just an obligation?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any get a reward when they get back home.
So if a Kohen becomes tamei, basically steps down temporarily and then another Kohen's there to replace.
Yeah.
We spoke about there are two.
If it would be a Kohen Gadol, then that would be more serious. If it would be a regular Kohen, then he only serves in the temple two weeks out of the year.
Regular Kohanim?
It was a roster.
So Kohen Gadol, he manages like the
The Kohen Gadol is allowed to serve every day, whenever he wants. He was probably there on a regular basis, but in Yom Kippur it was. Kohen Gadol also had to bring a korban mincha, half in the morning, half in the afternoon. Aviti Kohen Gadol, so he was there, but a regular Kohen was there twice a year. So if he became impure, so okay, so it wasn't as weak, hopefully.
To manage any korban.
No, only during the 2 weeks that it was there. There were 24. There was a rotation of 24 families. Out of a year, it would end up being there twice.
We presume that there will be other families that will take care of the corpse. So that's why they're not allowed to do the family. If in the case that they don't have a family to they designate someone like to help them with this.
I think so. I think we said that if they can get someone else to do it, then they're supposed to. They can call to someone else, unless they were on the road and the person died, then that was different. Yeah.
So it's kind of like if you're on the road and there's no other option, then
Right.
Don't they like take like something measure?
The measuring to which city the person died, that had to do if someone died in between cities and they didn't know who killed them, or so that was the Egla Rufa. They had to bring that cap, break the neck, and the elders of the closest city had to do that. This is something else. This is the person died. They didn't have to do an Egla Rufa. He died because he was old and ill. Okay. Vial kol nafshis meis layavai lamali. Said in the pasuk that for all, the beginning of the pasuk said that for all the souls of the dead, you should not come. This is referring to. It's interesting. It's a quote from the Kohen Gadol, because by the Nazir it was nefesh meis layavai. By the Kohen Gadol it was nafshis meis layavai. What are we going to do with that pasuk now? Gemara says like this: I'll call on all. That's the first part of the pasuk. Lafuki rechaikim, coming to tell us that he doesn't go to the funeral of people that aren't related, that he's not related to. Okay, that we could have known probably from a Kohen Hedyot as well. If a Kohen Hedyot can't go, then for sure a Kohen Gadol can't go, right? And then we say mace, all the souls, right? All the dead. That's lafuki krivim. We're on 49b. That's coming to exclude relatives. He can't go to the relatives either. Nafshes, souls. What do you get from that extra word? Lafuki revi istam shetzim shnei mesim shematame ba'ayil. I'll call nafshes mes layavai. But there's another problem, that if there's if the corpse lost blood, and let's say there were two corpses, so a revius of dam, one small amount of blood, would give off impurity. Let's say you have a revius of dam, but it's not from one corpse; it's from two corpses together. The combination of two corpses gave off revius of dam, but that would also contaminate in a house. Yeah. Not even without contact, just going into the house, that would give off impurity. And that's we're learning from nafshais, the plural souls, means that even if there's blood from two different corpses, that would also give off impurity. We have a new Mishnah.
Well, you didn't get to the bottom of this, I guess.
Well, we got to the bottom of it. The question is, we had different sources of how to learn it out. Basically, the rule is that a Nazir or a Kohen Gadol doesn't become contaminated to family members, but they do become contaminated to a mace mitzvah. And what's the source for that? That was Machlekes, Rabbi Shmuel, and Rabbi Akiva. But ultimately, it doesn't seem like there's any Machlekes. Like yes or no. There's just Machlekes in the source. Okay. Al elu tumais hanazir megaleach. On the following impurities, the nazir would shave his head. I'm going to list now impurities that are contracted with contact, carrying.
Whenever a Nazir shaves his head, you imply that he has to recount himself.
Contact, carrying, and also going under the same roof. These are the items that will cause impurity to a nazir. That'll have to shave. First one is alames. We're going to see that this one is going to be a machlekes in the Gemara. It's a machlekes tanaim if this is supposed to be recited in the Mishnah. We'll see. A corpse. There's going to be one opinion that's going to say this is so obvious it's not necessary to say it. Al kazayas min ames, a olive size of the corpse. That's enough to give off impurity even in a under the same roof. Besides contact. Al kazayas netzel. Netzel is if the corpse dissolved into a liquid, and so then a kazayas of that liquid would also give off impurity. Almali tarvid reket, and a spoonful of the dust of a corpse. This is not if it dissolved, this is if it disintegrated.
Ashes.
And the ashes is something else, I think. Does it say ashes there?
No.
Ashes is something else. This is if the body decomposed and what left it was just the dust. And that dust would be give off tumah if there was a spoonful of them. Where they had that joke with the this person that was cremated, they kept them on the window on the mantle. People thought it was an ashtray, so they would flick their cigarette. So one time, the wife walks by and says, "Oh my gosh, Harry's putting on weight." But this is not reka. That would be a that would be I don't know if that gives off tumah. This is just. Do the ashes give off tumah as well? I remember when we were looking for a house. One of the people had their thing with the ashes of the parents in it. It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Maybe they took it in that situation. Like they took not to buy the house or just
No, you could buy the house. You could buy the house. It's not a halacha thing. It was just uncomfortable.
No, but
There were other strange things about that house. There was a bathtub right near the front door. I was like, "What do you do with that?" It's like, "Oh, if in case someone comes to the door, you can just lean back and open the door." It's literally like.
Wow.
maybe it was in it's like clean the feet.
Oh, to clean the feet when they walk in. Oh, this is like a sauna type of. Anyway, ala shedrival golgolas on the spine and on the skull. We're talking about just the bones, but this itself would just give off that tumah. Golgolas is the skull. Al iver min ames. If there is a full limb of a corpse, now the full limb means that it would have the bone, the flesh, and the sinews. Al iver min achai sheish alav basar karai. And a limb of a living person, which has on it enough flesh that it would have been able to heal. You know, because if there's no flesh on the bone, then the flesh isn't going to grow back. But if there's a little bit of flesh, then it will regenerate, right? So if there was enough that it could heal, so then that was considered a full limb. Balchatzi kavatzamis, on half a kav of bones. A kav is like the size of 24 eggs. a little bit complicated, this point over here, because it has to give off tumah in a. We're talking about that it's going to give off tumah in a under the same roof. Usually it's a quarter of a kav, not a half a kav. So why over here is it a half a kav? It turns out that even though the Nazir would become tamei from a quarter of a kav, but he doesn't shave unless it's a half a kav. I don't know what he's going to do, but okay. Let's see, maybe the Gemara will discuss that. Well, chatzi lug dam. Here we have a similar problem. A half a lug of blood. Now, it's not really a half a lug of blood. It's really a revius, a quarter of a lug of blood. Here it says a half a lug. We have the same issue. Even though he would become tamei with a quarter of a lug of blood, but he only goes through the process if he came in contact with a half a lug of blood, would double the size. Valmagon, Valmasan, Valayalan, and all of these, it's whether he touches them, it's not supposed to be ve'al, it's supposed to be al. On touching it, on carrying it, or on coming into the tent under the same roof. When it comes to touching a bone the size of a barley, so a small bone like that, if you enter into a house under the same roof where that bone is, it doesn't make a person tamei. It's only if he touches it, al magoyev al masai, then he needs to touch it or carry it. It's a big question. I think the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Yochanan lost his 10 children. He had 10 children, they all passed away. And he had a bone of one of them that he wore as a necklace of the youngest one. It's a big question because that would give off tumah. The bone would give off tumah. And the commentators there discuss it. I forget where it is. Bab Metzia, I think. Sorry, it could be a tooth. And that's some say that it was a tooth, and the tooth would not give off tumah. Yeah.
You described it on the situation, and the only thing I could picture like a house where there was a corpse and it kind of had like maybe one of these emissions of blood or something.
Right.
And like after they clean her, so before the Nazir goes inside, like everything has to be clean, but is there like a waiting period of maybe clean everything and then wait 7 days?
No, not for the house. Once the house is clean, it's clean. The house itself doesn't become impure. It's only the area of the house. Anything that's attached to the ground isn't impure.
It's not.
Right. It doesn't become impure. You don't have to purify the house. It's not like tsaras on a house where the
No,
house
but if you
becomes
come
impure.
inside, you would.
Yeah, if you go inside it, you become tamei only while the corpse is there.
I think maybe we might learn in the future. There's a lot of stuff with deal with tumor and everything, but if you close them off with like walls.
Yeah, there is a way of, even though, right, a way of sealing it off. Okay.
Pirate skull and bones stuff.
Yeah.
And in museums where they have skulls, that
So what we're learning now is that touching the bone itself would give off tumah. By the way, we didn't learn if it's a Jew or a non-Jew.
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
It's when it comes to touching, I don't think it matters. When it comes to the same house, it matters. There's a machlekes if a non-Jew gives off impurity under the same roof.
That's for the skull, for anything. Skull
Let's say even a corpse. Okay, now, so if you would have just a plain bone, you would need to touch it. If it would be an actual limb, like the bone with the flesh, with the hand, with the sinews and all of that together, then that would give off impurity even under the same roof.
It has to be a Jewish one.
Then there's a machlekes if it has to be Jewish. Right?
Okay, so
Unless it was a full skeleton,
yeah,
then that would give off impurity even
not Jewish.
not even if it's not Jewish, but not even if it's without any bone, even if it's without any flesh, or a majority of a skeleton.
They do have into these museums or churches where they have skulls and bones and
Right.
piled up to show how they dispensed with people in the Inquisition.
Cambodia or something.
No, it's in Lima and Cusco,
Oh,
the
Right.
Spanish place.
Right.
Those are all tumor.
Yeah. Now, tumah doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that a Kohen should not go there. You know. Okay. Al elu anazir megaleach. The Mishnah repeats itself. It says, for these things, the Nazir shaves his head. Umaza b'shlishi ub'shvi, and he sprinkles the blood of the paradum on him on the third day and on the seventh day. B'seiser sakoidman, and he has to restart the count, right? Ve'ina maschal limnei salad shiatar, and he doesn't start the count until he becomes pure. Maybe it's karbonosav, and he also brings the sacrifice. Now, Taisus takes that out. Maybe that last point, maybe it's karbonosav. He says that's not part of the Mishnah. Kitana Rabbanon. Rabbis taught in the Brisa. After Reb Meir passed away, Amalam Rabbi Yehuda Talmid, Rabbi Yehuda says to his students, Al yikansu Talmidi Reb Meir lekan. Don't let the students of Reb Meir enter. Nesha kantranim him, because they are quarrelsome. I think the word cantankerous maybe is associated with kantranim. Maybe not. Kantranim him. And they're not coming to study Torah. They're just coming to bother me, to cause me pain. This is Rabbi Yehuda saying about Reb Meir's students. Dachak Sumchas v'nichnas. Sumchas, the famous student of Reb Meir, Sumchas. So he pushes his way in. Amalahem, he says, Kach shanali Reb Meir. This is what Reb Meir taught me. Aleilu tumas anazim megaleach. The following teaches this Mishnah. Is tumas that the Nazir has to shave his head. Alameis velkazayis minameis. If it's a corpse, or if it's a olive size of a corpse. Kos Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda gets angry. Amalem leikach amarti lachem. Have I not told you? Al yikansu talmidei Reb Meir lekan. Don't let the students in. They should kantranim him because they're quarrelsome. Al kazayis minameis megaleach. Alameis lekolshkin. Why does he have to say that? If the Nazir has to shave his head for just an olive size, for sure he has to shave his head for the entire corpse, which is a quote from our Mishnah. Apparently, according to Rabbi Yehuda, our Mishnah only said al elu tatumas megalech anazir megalech al kazayas minames. It didn't say al ames for the corpse because that was so obvious. You have to shave for the kazayas for sure. Amar Rabbi Yosi says. Yaimru, people are now going to say, we're on top of page 50. Meir Shachav, Rabbi Yosi is a contemporary of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. He says, Rabbi Meir passed away. Yehuda gets angry. Yosi Shasak, Rabbi Yosi is quiet. It's interesting because Rabbi Yosi was quiet in the other instance as well. Remember when there was Rabbi Yehuda, Yosi and Reb Shimon, they were talking about the Romans, and Rabbi Yehuda spoke highly about the Romans. Reb Shimon spoke negative about the Romans, and Reb Yosi was quiet. So you have that term in another place. Reb Yosi is quiet. Anyway, Yosi Shasak, Reb Yosi is going to be quiet. Torah Matela, what's going to be with studying Torah? Amar Rabbi Yosi says, you know what it means? When it says Nazir has to shave his head, has to do with the whole recount of his Naziris. If he comes in contact with the corpse, and if he comes in contact with the kazayas of a corpse, what does it mean, the corpse? Of course, he says we're talking about a corpse that doesn't have any flesh on it. It doesn't have a kazayas flesh. Huh. But he was concerned about that. That's why now he speaks up. He didn't want to be quiet. So, talking about a corpse that doesn't have a kazayas basar. Now, if it doesn't have a kazayas basar, so then it would only give off impurity if it was the majority of the corpse, the bones. 1 second. We said that if there's even one limb that has enough flesh on it, even if it's not a kazayas, but it has enough flesh to be able to regenerate, to heal, so you would already, the Nazir would already become tummy and he would have to recount the Nazirs. Now you're telling me that it doesn't have a kazayas, but maybe it has enough to regenerate. And if that's the case, so even if it would be one bone, he would have to recount. Now you're telling me if it's a full corpse, Ella Kedam Rabbi Yechanan. Rather, it's like Rabbi Yechanan said regarding something else. He said, You see, when it's said about it doesn't have enough kazayas of flesh on the corpse, we were thinking that it had everything else, that it had the sinews, the bone, the sinews, but it was missing some flesh. Now, what Rabbi Yechanan is telling us that it was missing the sinews. How was a body was missing the sinews? Because this was a stillborn, the fetus, that the sinews didn't develop yet, like ligaments, I think, veins, maybe didn't develop yet, and so therefore it's not considered a full limb. So if that's the case, then it wouldn't be just if it has a little bit of flesh that would give off the impurity. It would need to be like the majority of the bones to be able to do that. Rava says Rava says we're talking about actually where you have the majority of the bones. It doesn't have to be that it was the full corpse, but it could be just the majority of the bones that which is equals a quarter of a kav full of bones. Quarter of a kav full of bones, which is about the size of 6 eggs. A kav, I think, is 24 eggs, 6 eggs. So it's probably still referring to a fetus or a stillborn, because or else it would be much larger than that. And this would give off impurity as well. Funny, because in the Mishnah we said it needed to be a chatzi kav. But the chatzi kav, the half a kav, was not necessarily roiv binyane.
It's a small corpse or a fetus.
Yeah. I have a problem with this because where were these bones? Why is it only a roiva of a quarter of a kav? The Mishnah said it needed to be a half a kav. Maybe you could say that when the Mishnah says a half a kav, it's talking about where it's a half a kav of bones, but it doesn't come from the majority of the build of the body. Because it comes from less of the majority. Even though it's such a large amount, half a kav, but it's not the majority of the build of the body. So, but Tosfos says no, you can't say that. Now I'm not sure when it's a half a kav, when it's a quarter kav. Oh, that's what this Tosfos is doing here. Okay. Yeah.
Quarter kav to the majority
Right.
of the bones.
Right. Problem is when we said half a kav, what were we referring to over there? Where it wasn't the majority?
That's the only difference.
Okay. Al-Kazayas Mace, Al-Kazayas Netzel. Okay, let's leave it over here. Let's leave it over here. Okay.
So, later.
Yeah. Okay. Have a good day.